My name is Nora, and I'm 32. My sister Rebecca just told my daughters they weren't important enough for the Christmas photos. My 6-year-old Lily is crying into her sleeve, and 8-year-old Emma is staring at the floor like she wants to disappear. I'm standing here in my sister's perfect living room, watching my children's hearts break in real time. The worst part? I'm not even surprised. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the family disappointment. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Now let me back up and tell you how we got here. See, I've always been the family's cautionary tale, the one who made all the wrong choices according to everyone else. Married too young? Check. Divorced by 30? Double check. Working 2 jobs to support 2 kids while living in a tiny apartment? Triple check with a side of, we told you so. My sister Rebecca, on the other hand, was the golden child. Still is, actually. Married to successful lawyer James, living in their suburban palace, driving the luxury SUV that costs more than I make in a year. Rebecca never let me forget it either. Every family gathering was like a masterclass in subtle humiliation, with her playing the concerned big sister who just wanted what was best for me. You know that tone, right? The one that sounds caring but cuts like a blade. Oh, Nora, you look tired. Are you getting enough sleep? I worry about you working so hard. Translation: you look like garbage, and your life is a mess. My mother Margaret wasn't much better. She had this way of introducing me to people. This is my younger daughter, Nora. She's figuring things out. Like I was 22 instead of 32, like being a single mother was just a phase I was going through. Like my accounting degree was invisible. But my girls, Lily and Emma, they were my entire world. Smart, funny, resilient kids who deserved so much better than being treated like second-class family members. They'd been asking about Christmas at Aunt Rebecca's house for weeks, talking about their cousins, excited about the big family celebration. I almost didn't go. I stood in our little apartment that morning, holding the invitation Rebecca had sent, knowing exactly what awaited us. The judgmental looks, the passive-aggressive comments, the way they'd analyze everything from our clothes to our manners. But Lily had been so excited about seeing her cousins, and Emma had been practicing Christmas carols for days, wanting to perform for the family. Maybe this year would be different, I thought. Maybe Christmas magic would soften their hearts. Maybe they'd finally see my daughters for the amazing kids they were, instead of just extensions of my supposed failures. Yeah, right. Christmas magic. I should have known better than to believe in fairy tales at my age. The drive to Rebecca's house took 45 minutes through Christmas Eve traffic. Lily chatted nonstop about the presents she hoped Santa would bring, while Emma sat quietly, occasionally asking if I thought Grandma Margaret would like the handmade ornament she'd crafted at school. Of course she will, I told her, glancing in the rearview mirror at my sweet, thoughtful daughter. What I didn't say was that Margaret would probably find some way to critique it. Too messy, too childish, too something. Rebecca's neighborhood always made me feel like I was driving through a magazine. Perfect lawns, elaborate Christmas displays, houses that probably had more square footage than my entire apartment building. Her driveway could fit 3 cars comfortably, unlike my assigned parking spot that barely accommodated my 10-year-old Honda. The girls pressed their faces against the windows as we pulled up. Rebecca had outdone herself with the decorations this year. Professional lights wrapped around every tree, a massive wreath on the front door, and lawn ornaments that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Wow, Lily breathed. It's like a Christmas wonderland. It sure is, baby. And it was. Rebecca had always had expensive taste and the budget to match. Even her Christmas decorations had to be the best, the brightest, the most impressive in the neighborhood. We walked up the stone pathway, and I straightened Emma's dress for the 3rd time, smoothed down Lily's flyaway hair, and checked my own appearance in the reflection of Rebecca's glass door. I'd worn my nicest dress, the navy blue one I'd splurged on last year for a work party. It was simple, conservative, appropriate. It was also clearly from a department store, not the boutique stores where Rebecca shopped. Before I could ring the doorbell, the door swung open, revealing Rebecca in all her holiday glory. Red cashmere sweater, perfectly styled hair, makeup that looked professionally applied. She looked like she'd stepped out of a Christmas catalog. "Nora!" she exclaimed, air kissing near my cheek without actually making contact. "You made it! Girls, look how much you've grown." The girls smiled shyly and mumbled hellos. Rebecca looked them over with the same expression she might use to evaluate produce at the grocery store. I could practically see her mental checklist. Hair could be neater, clothes adequate but nothing special. Behavior, we'd see. Come in," she said, ushering us into the foyer. Everyone's already here. The house smelled like pine candles and expensive perfume. Family members I hadn't seen since last Christmas were scattered throughout the living room, drinks in hand, engaged in animated conversations about vacations and home renovations and private schools. James nodded at me from across the room but didn't approach. My cousins waved politely. Margaret looked up from her conversation with Rebecca's mother-in-law and gave me that look, the one that said she was already cataloging everything she disapproved of. "Nora," she called out. "How nice to see you. Girls, come give your grandmother a hug." Lily and Emma obediently walked over for hugs that lasted exactly the socially acceptable amount of time. Not a second longer. And that was it. No, "How are you?" No, "Tell me about school." No genuine interest in their lives whatsoever. Just duty hugs, and then back to the adult conversations they were too young and, apparently, too unimportant to join. The night was off to its predictably disappointing start. Dinner was served in Rebecca's formal dining room, complete with her wedding china and cloth napkins that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The table could seat 12 comfortably, which meant there was plenty of room for everyone, in theory. In practice, the seating arrangement told a different story. Rebecca had positioned me at the far end of the table, with Lily and Emma squeezed in beside me on child-sized chairs that she'd clearly pulled from somewhere else in the house. The message was clear: you're here, but just barely. The conversation flowed around us like we were invisible. Talk of European vacations, private school applications, investment portfolios. When I tried to contribute something about my work, James interrupted to launch into a story about his latest case. When Emma tried to tell her cousin about her school play, Margaret shushed her, saying the adults were talking. Have you ever experienced that feeling of being physically present but completely erased? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. My girls ate quietly, occasionally glancing at me for reassurance. I smiled at them, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. They were being perfect little angels, using their best manners, saying please and thank you, not spilling anything on Rebecca's pristine tablecloth. But I could see Rebecca watching them with hawk eyes, just waiting for them to slip up. When Lily accidentally dropped her fork, Rebecca's sigh was audible across the table. When Emma laughed at something her cousin said, Rebecca shot me a look like I should control my child's volume better. "So Nora?" Margaret said during a lull in conversation, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant trouble was coming. "How's the job situation?" "I'm doing well, actually," I replied carefully. "The accounting practice is growing, and I've been taking on more clients." "Oh, you still call it a practice?" Rebecca laughed, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "That's so cute. James, didn't you say that technically it's just freelance work unless you have an actual office?" James shifted uncomfortably. "Well, there are different levels of—" "I work from home," I said evenly. "It allows me to be available for the girls when they need me." "How convenient," Margaret murmured, "though I imagine it must be difficult to be taken seriously without a proper office environment." The criticism was wrapped in concern, as always. But my daughters were listening to every word, absorbing the subtle message that their mother was somehow less professional, less successful, less worthy of respect than the other adults at this table. Emma's face had gone very still, the way it did when she was trying not to cry. Lily was fidgeting with her napkin, tearing little pieces off the edges. They were starting to understand that something was wrong, that we weren't quite welcome here despite being family. I reached under the table and squeezed both their hands gently. Whatever happened next, I needed them to know that none of this was their fault, but I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. After dinner came the moment Rebecca had been building toward all evening, the annual Christmas photo session. She directed everyone toward the living room where the Christmas tree stood in all its designer glory. White lights, gold ornaments, and a color scheme that probably took hours to coordinate. "All right, everyone," Rebecca announced, clasping her hands together like a cruise director organizing activities. "Time for our family Christmas photo. This year I thought we'd do something really special." She had her professional camera ready, tripod set up, lighting adjusted just so. Because of course Rebecca was also an amateur photographer on top of everything else. The woman collected hobbies like some people collected stamps. The adults began arranging themselves around the tree while the kids bounced excitedly nearby. Lily and Emma hung back near me, waiting for instructions on where they should stand for the photo. That's when Rebecca looked at them directly for the first time all evening. And the look on her face, it wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse. It was dismissive, like they were furniture that needed to be moved out of the way. "Actually," she said, her voice taking on that artificially sweet tone that I'd learned to fear over the years, "I think this year we should keep it to just the core family members." The room went quiet. Even my typically oblivious cousins seemed to sense that something was off. "Core family?" I repeated slowly. Rebecca's smile never wavered. "You know, the adults and their children." James and I, Mom, the cousins. It'll be cleaner this way. More cohesive. Emma stepped closer to me, her small hand finding mine. Lily looked confused, glancing around at the other children who were clearly going to be included in this core family photo. But we are family, Lily said in her small, clear voice. We're your nieces. The innocence in her statement made the whole situation even more brutal. Here was my 6-year-old daughter, trying to logic her way out of being excluded, not understanding that logic had nothing to do with it. Rebecca knelt down to Lily's level, still wearing that horrible, condescending smile. Of course you're family, sweetie, but sometimes in photography, you have to make choices about composition and… She trailed off, looking up at me like I should help her explain why my children weren't good enough to be in the family Christmas photo. Like I should participate in my own daughter's humiliation. That's when she said it. The words that would echo in my head for months afterward. Your kids just aren't important enough for the photos, Nora. They'll just ruin everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Margaret looked uncomfortable, though she didn't speak up to defend her granddaughters. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break. Crack. Like the first fracture in ice that's about to shatter completely. I looked down at Lily and Emma, saw their faces crumpling with understanding, and something shifted inside me. Not rage, clarity. Crystal clear, ice-cold clarity about exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. Did you just say my daughters would ruin everything? I asked Rebecca, my voice surprisingly steady. Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment. Nora, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that for the photo composition. No, I interrupted. You meant exactly what you said. You think my children are an embarrassment? You think they don't belong in your perfect family picture? Margaret finally spoke up, but not to defend her granddaughters. Nora, don't make a scene. Rebecca was just trying to… To what? To humiliate 2 little girls on Christmas Eve? Mission accomplished. I knelt down and looked my daughters in the eyes. They were fighting tears, trying to be brave, but I could see how much Rebecca's words had hurt them. These beautiful, innocent children who had done nothing wrong except exist as proof that their mother wasn't living up to the family's impossible standards. Girls, I said softly, get your coats. But Mom, Emma whispered, what about presents? What about Christmas morning with the cousins? The hope in her voice nearly broke my heart. She was still thinking this could be fixed, that somehow we could salvage Christmas from the wreckage Rebecca had made of it. We're going home, I told them gently. We're going to have our own Christmas, where everyone is important enough for the photos. I stood up and faced the room full of adults who had just watched my children be emotionally eviscerated without saying a word. They were all looking at their hands, their drinks, anywhere except at me or the girls. You know what, Rebecca? I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. You're absolutely right. My daughters would ruin your photo, because they have something you'll never capture on camera. What's that? She asked, defensive now. They have hearts that aren't made of ice. I helped the girls into their coats, gathered our purses, and walked toward the front door. Behind us, I could hear whispered conversations starting up, damage control mode kicking in. As we reached the door, Rebecca called out, Nora, you're being dramatic. Come back and we'll figure this out. I turned around one last time. You know what? You just gave me the best Christmas gift ever. What? You showed my daughters exactly what kind of people we don't want to become. And with that, we walked out into the cold December night. The last Christmas we would ever spend trying to fit into their perfect, heartless little world. The drive home was quiet, except for Lily's occasional sniffles. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching my girls process what had just happened. Emma stared out the window while Lily leaned against her big sister for comfort. When we got to our apartment, I made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and we cuddled on the couch in our pajamas. No fancy decorations, no designer lighting, just 3 people who loved each other figuring out how to salvage Christmas from the ashes of family betrayal. Mom, Emma said after a long silence, why don't they like us? The question hit me like a physical blow. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that some people are just small and cruel? How do you tell your children that their own grandmother values appearances more than their feelings? It's not about you, baby, I told her, stroking her hair. Some people are so worried about everything looking perfect that they forget what actually matters. What actually matters? Lily asked. Lily, cuddling deeper into my side. Love, kindness, being there for each other, making people feel important and wanted. I squeezed them both tighter. You two are the most important things in my world, and nobody gets to tell us differently. That night, after I'd tucked them into bed and assured them that Santa would definitely find our apartment, I sat at our kitchen table and made some decisions. We were done. Done with the subtle insults, the backhanded compliments, the constant feeling of not measuring up. Done with exposing my daughters to people who saw them as inconveniences rather than blessings. I pulled out my laptop and started working. I had accounting clients who valued my expertise, who respected my work, who paid me well for my services. I had skills that I'd been downplaying for years, afraid of seeming too ambitious, too successful, too threatening to my family's narrative about my failure. Well, their narrative could go to hell. I was going to build something real, something mine, something that would give my daughters the security and respect they deserved. Over the next few hours, I researched business licenses, drafted a business plan, and started the process of turning my freelance accounting work into a legitimate practice. If Rebecca thought I was just playing office from my kitchen table, she was about to learn otherwise. By dawn, I had the framework for a real business. By the new year, I would have an actual office space. And by next Christmas, I'd have something Rebecca could never buy with all her husband's money. Genuine success built on my own merit. The best part? I'd done it all while my daughters slept safely in the next room, knowing they were loved unconditionally. That's what victory actually looked like, not some staged photo where half the family gets erased to make the picture prettier. Rebecca had wanted to exclude my children from her perfect family image. Fine. I was about to exclude her entire toxic family from our lives permanently. And unlike her Christmas photos, my decision was going to last forever. 6 months later, I was sitting in my actual office. Not my kitchen table, my real office with Nora Blake Accounting Services printed on the glass door, when my phone rang. The number looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Something told me to let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Nora? The voice was shaky, uncertain. It took me a moment to recognize it because I'd never heard Rebecca sound anything but supremely confident. It's Rebecca. I got your number from Cousin Linda. I hope that's okay. I leaned back in my leather office chair. Yes, actual leather, because my business was thriving, and waited. After 6 months of complete silence from my family, this call had to be interesting. I know we haven't talked since, she paused, and I could practically hear her struggling with how to reference that disastrous Christmas without admitting fault. Since the holidays, but I need to ask you something. I'm listening. My tone was neutral, professional, the same voice I used with difficult clients. I need help, Nora, financial help. Well, not money exactly, but advice. James is... Another long pause. James is having some problems at the firm. There are debts, and I'm pregnant, and I don't know how to handle any of this. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. Rebecca, who'd spent decades making me feel like a financial disaster, was calling me for money advice. Rebecca, who'd dismissed my accounting work as playing office, was admitting she needed my professional expertise. I see, I said carefully. And why are you calling me specifically? Because you're an accountant, she said, as if this was obvious. And because, well, you raised 2 kids on your own. You know how to make things work when money's tight. There it was. The admission she'd never made before, that maybe, just maybe, I'd actually accomplished something difficult and worthwhile. That single motherhood wasn't just a series of bad decisions, but a complex challenge I'd navigated successfully. Tell me more about the situation, I said, pulling out a notepad. Not because I was planning to help her, but because I wanted to understand just how far the mighty had fallen. The story that tumbled out was almost too perfect. James had made some terrible investment decisions with client money. Not illegal technically, but catastrophically stupid. The kind of mistakes that made lawyers lose their licenses and their reputations. The fancy house was mortgaged to the hilt. The luxury cars were leased with payments they could barely afford. The private school tuition for their kids was months behind. And now Rebecca was pregnant with their 3rd child, facing the possibility of losing everything they'd built their identity around. The worst part, Rebecca continued, her voice getting smaller, is how people are treating me. James's partners, our friends, even some family members. They look at me like she struggled for the words. Like you're a burden? I suggested helpfully. Like your problems are somehow your fault? Like you should be embarrassed to show your face in public? Yes, she whispered, exactly like that. I felt a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. After 32 years of being on the receiving end of that treatment, it was fascinating to hear Rebecca describe the experience from the other side. That must be really difficult for you, I said, my voice dripping with the kind of false sympathy she'd perfected over the years. I can't imagine what it's like to feel judged and looked down on by people who used to respect you. The silence stretched between us. I could hear Rebecca breathing, probably realizing that I was throwing her own medicine back at her. Nora, I know I haven't always been... She started. What? You haven't always been what, Rebecca? I haven't always been fair to you. About your situation, your choices, my situation, my choices. Even in her apology, she couldn't quite bring herself to admit that she'd been cruel, that she'd treated me and my daughters like second-class family members, that she'd spent years making me feel small and worthless. That's an interesting way to put it, I said. Is that what we're calling it now? Being unfair? What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Another long pause. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I'm scared, Nora. I'm scared we're going to lose everything, and I don't know how to handle this. I've never had to worry about money before. I've never had people whisper about me behind my back. I've never felt so worthless, I supplied. Like a failure? Like everyone's judging your every decision and finding you lacking? Yes. The word came out as a sob. I could have ended the call right there. I could have told her that karma was a beautiful thing and hung up. Part of me wanted to. The part that remembered Christmas Eve. The part that remembered years of condescending comments and subtle humiliations. But there was another part of me. The part that had been shaped by raising 2 daughters. That recognized something important in this moment. Rebecca was finally experiencing what I'd lived with my entire life. She was finally understanding what it felt like to be judged, dismissed, and found wanting by the people who were supposed to love you. And for the first time in our relationship, we were having an honest conversation. No pretense, no performance, just 2 women dealing with life's complications. Rebecca, I said finally, I need you to understand something. When you called my daughters unimportant, when you said they would ruin your perfect Christmas photo, you didn't just hurt them. You showed me exactly what kind of person you really are, and what kind of family I'd been trying so hard to fit into. I know, she whispered. I know I was terrible. I was awful to you and to Lily and Emma. I was so used to everything being perfect, and when things weren't perfect, I took it out on you. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was closer than I'd ever expected to get. So what exactly are you asking me for? I said. Help. Advice. I don't know how to live like this. How did you do it, Nora? How did you manage when everything felt impossible? The question hung in the air between us. How had I done it? How had I survived years of financial stress, social judgment, and family rejection while raising 2 children and building a career? The answer was simple, actually. I'd done it by refusing to give up, by working harder than I thought possible, by finding strength I didn't know I had, and by finally learning to value myself even when nobody else would. I did it, I said slowly, by stopping caring what people like you thought of me. The conversation with Rebecca stayed with me for days. I found myself thinking about it during client meetings, while helping Lily with homework, during those quiet moments before sleep when your mind processes the day's events. What surprised me wasn't that Rebecca had fallen from grace. Wealthy people make stupid decisions all the time, but that she'd called me for help. After years of treating me like the family failure, she'd turned to me in her moment of crisis. The irony was so perfect it felt like fiction. My daughters had adapted beautifully to our new life. Without the constant stress of family gatherings where they felt unwelcome, they'd blossomed. Emma had joined the school debate team and was discovering she had a talent for public speaking. Lily had made friends with the girl next door and spent most afternoons giggling over shared secrets and elaborate games. Our little apartment felt like a sanctuary now instead of a placeholder. I'd redecorated with warm colors and comfortable furniture, creating spaces where the girls could spread out homework, art projects, and the general chaos of childhood without feeling like they had to apologize for taking up room. The business was exceeding every projection I'd made. Word-of-mouth referrals were bringing in new clients faster than I could handle them. I'd hired an assistant, a young woman named Jessica, who was studying for her CPA certification. The office space I'd initially thought was too ambitious now felt almost too small. But the real victory was subtler than financial success or professional recognition. It was in the way my daughters carried themselves now. Confident, secure, unafraid to laugh too loudly or take up space. They'd learned what it felt like to be unconditionally loved and valued, and that knowledge had settled into their bones. 3 weeks after Rebecca's call, she called again. This time, her voice was steadier, but still lacking its old arrogance. Nora, I've been thinking about our conversation, about what you said about stopping caring what people think. Okay, I said. I'm genuinely curious where this was going. I need to know how you did it. Practically, I mean. Because right now, I'm drowning. The house is going into foreclosure. James might lose his license. Our friends have stopped inviting us to things. And I'm pregnant and terrified, and I don't know how to function when everything feels like it's falling apart. I recognized the desperation in her voice because I'd lived it. The panic that comes with financial insecurity, the shame of social exile, the overwhelming sense that you're failing at everything that's supposed to define you as a successful adult. First, I said, you need to separate what you need from what you want. That house, those cars, the private schools, those are wants. Food, shelter, healthcare, those are needs. Make a list and be honest about which is which. But the kids' school, Nora, how can I tell them they have to leave their friends, their activities, everything they know? The same way I told my kids we couldn't afford family vacations or brand name clothes or a dozen other things I wished I could give them. You explain that sometimes life changes and families adapt together. That's different. Your kids never had those things to begin with. And there it was. Even in her crisis, Rebecca couldn't quite let go of the belief that her children deserved more, were entitled to more, than mine had been. Some attitudes die hard. Rebecca, I said carefully, do you want my help, or do you want to keep explaining why your situation is worse than mine was? Silence. Then quietly, I want your help. Then you need to accept that your kid's disappointment about changing schools is not a tragedy. It's an adjustment. Children are more resilient than you think, especially when their parents stop treating temporary setbacks like permanent failures. I walked her through the basics: budgeting, prioritizing expenses, finding less expensive alternatives to their current lifestyle. It was information I could have given to any client, but with Rebecca, it felt personal. I was teaching my sister how to live the way I'd been living all along. What about James's career? She asked. If he loses his license, what then? Then he finds another way to make a living. People reinvent themselves all the time, Rebecca. The world doesn't end because one door closes. But he's been a lawyer for 15 years. It's who he is. No, I corrected her. It's what he does, or did. Who he is depends on how he handles this situation, how he treats his family during the stress, whether he takes responsibility for his mistakes or spends his energy blaming circumstances. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. You sound different, Nora. Stronger. More sure of yourself. I am stronger, I said. That's what happens when you stop trying to be someone else's version of successful and start building your own life. I don't know how to do that. I don't know who I am without the house and the car and the social status. I don't know what I'm good at besides being James's wife and the kid's mother. It was perhaps the most honest thing Rebecca had ever said to me. And for the first time in our conversation, I felt genuine sympathy for her instead of just satisfaction at her downfall. Then this might be the best thing that ever happened to you, I told her, because now you get to find out. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the street where people were walking dogs, pushing strollers, living their ordinary lives without crisis or drama. For the first time since that awful Christmas, I felt something approaching peace about my family situation. Not forgiveness. Rebecca had a lot more work to do before we got to that point. But understanding. She was finally experiencing the world from my perspective, and it was humbling her in ways that success never could. Whether she learned from it or just survived it remained to be seen. But at least now we were having real conversations instead of performance pieces. And that, surprisingly, felt like progress. 2 months passed before Rebecca called again. This time, the background noise told me she was somewhere public. A coffee shop maybe, or a library. Definitely not the quiet luxury of her home office. We lost the house, she said without preamble. The cars are gone too. We're staying with James's parents until we can find an apartment we can actually afford. How are you handling it? I asked, and I realized I genuinely wanted to know. The old Rebecca would have seen this question as an opportunity to heap guilt on me for not offering help. This Rebecca just sounded tired. Terribly, if I'm honest. The kids are confused and angry. James is alternately furious and completely shut down. His parents keep making helpful suggestions about how we should have managed our money better. And I'm 7 months pregnant, living in someone else's house, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life I didn't even realize I'd built on such shaky ground. She paused, and I could hear the background chatter of whatever public space she'd escaped to. But you know what's strange, Nora? For the first time in years, I'm having real conversations with my husband, not about schedules or social obligations or keeping up appearances, about what we actually want, what we're actually afraid of, who we want to be when all this is over. I found myself smiling despite everything. That sounds healthy. It is. It's also terrifying. Turns out we've been strangers for a while. Just 2 people managing the same household and social calendar. We're having to get to know each other again. And how's that going? Better than I expected. Actually, James, without the pressure of maintaining his big-shot lawyer image, is gentler, more present with the kids. He's been helping them with homework every night because we can't afford the tutoring anymore, and he's discovering he actually enjoys teaching them things. There was something different in Rebecca's voice. Less frantic, more grounded. Crisis had stripped away the constant performance anxiety that had defined her for years. "I owe you an apology," she said suddenly. "A real one. Not the half-hearted thing I tried to give you on the phone before. I'm listening. I spent years treating you like you were less than me because your life didn't look like what I thought success should look like. I was cruel to your daughters because they reminded me of choices I was afraid to make, freedoms I was afraid to want. I made you feel small because it made me feel bigger." She took a shaky breath. "That Christmas, when I said Lily and Emma weren't important enough for the photos. God, Nora. I replay that moment constantly. The look on their faces, the way they tried not to cry. What kind of person says that to children? A person who's forgotten what actually matters," I said quietly. "I want them to know how sorry I am. I know sorry doesn't fix it, but I want them to hear it from me directly. Not just you telling them I feel bad, but me looking them in the eye and telling them they are important. They always were important, and I was wrong." The request surprised me. The old Rebecca would have sent an expensive gift basket with a card. This Rebecca wanted to face the consequences of her actions directly. "That's up to them," I told her. "I'll ask how they feel about it." "Fair enough." Another pause. "There's something else. I've been thinking about what you said, about finding out who I am without all the external stuff. I've been volunteering at a women's shelter, helping with their financial literacy program. Now that was unexpected. How did that come about? One of the women at the shelter is a client of yours. She recognized my name when I mentioned I was your sister, said you'd helped her get back on her feet after her divorce. She suggested I might have skills that would be useful there. Do you?" "Apparently, yes. 15 years of managing our household finances and social calendar translates pretty well to helping other women navigate bureaucracy and budget planning. Who knew?" I could hear the surprise in her own voice, as if she was discovering herself in real time. "The women there don't care that I used to live in a mansion or drive a luxury car. They care that I know how to read a lease agreement and explain why payday loans are financial suicide. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being valued for what I can do, not what I have. How does it feel?" "Scary, good, real." She laughed, and it sounded lighter than any laugh I'd heard from her in years. "Turns out I'm actually pretty good at helping people solve problems. I just never had to develop that skill set before because money solved most problems for us." We talked for another 20 minutes about practical things: how to find affordable apartments, which programs offered assistance to families in transition, how to help children process major life changes. It was the kind of conversation I'd always wished we could have. Two sisters sharing knowledge and support instead of competing for social position. When we finally said goodbye, Rebecca added something that stayed with me for days. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think this crisis might be the best thing that ever happened to our family. We're figuring out who we actually are when everything else gets stripped away. And you know what? We're better people than I thought we were." Maybe that was the real Christmas miracle I'd been waiting for all those years. Not the perfect family gathering or the acceptance I'd always craved, but the chance for all of us to become more honest, more real, more worthy of each other's love. Not that I was ready to trust it completely yet, but for the first time in decades, I was curious about what kind of relationship Rebecca and I might build from this new foundation. 3 weeks later, Rebecca showed up at my office unannounced. I looked up from a client file to see her standing in the doorway, very pregnant and looking nervous in a way I'd never seen before. She wore jeans and a maternity sweater, normal clothes, not the designer armor she used to favor. "I know I should have called first," she said, hands fidgeting with the strap of a simple canvas bag. "But I was in the neighborhood and I hoped maybe you'd have time to talk. Come in," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Jessica, would you mind getting us some tea?" My assistant nodded and stepped out, leaving us alone in the quiet of the afternoon. Rebecca looked around my office, really seeing it for the first time. The diplomas on the wall, the client files organized in neat stacks, the professional certificates that documented years of hard work. "This is really impressive, Nora," she said, and I could hear genuine respect in her voice. "I mean, I knew you were doing well, but seeing it, you built something real here. Thank you." I waited. Rebecca hadn't driven across town just to admire my office decor. She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her words came out in a rush. "James got a job offer. Not a legal position. He can't practice law anymore, but a good job with a nonprofit that helps people navigate bankruptcy proceedings. It's about half what he used to make, but it's honest work, and he's excited about it. That's wonderful news." "It is. But the job is in Portland. We'd have to move, leave everything familiar behind. Start completely over in a new city where nobody knows us, where we don't have any social connections or family support." I began to understand why she was here. "And you're scared. Terrified. I've lived in this city my entire life. My friends are here, my doctors, the kids' schools. Everything I know about how to function in the world is tied to this place. Jessica returned with our tea, and Rebecca wrapped her hands around the warm mug like it was anchoring her to something solid. But there's something else, she continued. Something I need to tell you before we potentially move away and this opportunity disappears forever. She took a deep breath. I talked to Lily and Emma. With your permission, I called and asked if they'd be willing to meet with me. They said yes. My surprise must have shown on my face because she quickly added, I know you said it was up to them, and I wanted to respect that. We met at that ice cream place near your apartment. Neutral territory. How did it go? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. They're extraordinary children, Nora. I mean, I always knew they were smart and sweet, but sitting with them, really listening to them. They're wise in ways I never was at their age. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Lily and Emma sitting in an ice cream parlor booth, chocolate smears on their faces, grinning at the camera. Rebecca was in the photo too, and she looked younger somehow. Lighter. I told them everything I should have told them that Christmas. That they are important, that they matter, that family photos mean nothing if they don't include everyone you love. I told them I was sorry and that being sorry doesn't fix what I did, but that I wanted them to know. What did they say? Emma asked me why I'd been so mean to you for so long. Direct question, no dancing around it. So I told her the truth, that I'd been scared of not being perfect. And when I felt scared, I tried to make other people feel small so I could feel bigger. Rebecca smiled through her tears. And then Lily asked if that worked, if making you feel small actually made me feel better. And I had to tell her no, it didn't work at all. It just made me feel guilty and empty and far away from people I loved. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to it. Understanding maybe. Recognition that Rebecca was finally seeing the impact of her choices and taking responsibility for them. They asked if I would visit them before we moved to Portland, if we could maybe try being a real family instead of the pretend version we've been playing all these years. What did you tell them? That I'd love that, if their mom was okay with it. If you think you can trust me not to hurt them again? The question hung in the air between us. Could I trust her? Could I risk letting my daughters care about their aunt only to have her disappoint them again if life got difficult? But as I looked at Rebecca, really looked at her, I saw someone fundamentally changed by her experiences. The crisis had burned away her pretenses and left behind something more real, more honest. She still had work to do, but she was doing it. I think, I said slowly, that we could try, carefully, with clear boundaries and honest communication. No more performances or pretending everything is perfect when it isn't. Yes, I want that. I want to know my nieces as real people, not just extensions of family drama. I want them to know their cousins, to feel connected to family in positive ways. She paused, then added something that surprised me completely. I also want them to know they have an aunt who learned how to be a better person because their mother showed her what real strength looks like. For the first time in our adult lives, Rebecca was acknowledging that I had something valuable to teach her instead of the other way around. It was a small moment, but it felt revolutionary. There's something else I need to tell you, Rebecca said. About Mom. I tensed, expecting more family drama. She's been asking about you, about the girls. She heard through the family grapevine that you have your own business now, that you're doing well. And I think she's starting to realize that maybe she backed the wrong horse all these years. Meaning what? Meaning she spent decades treating you like the family failure while building up James and me as the success stories. And now James has lost everything, and I'm starting my life over from scratch, while you've built something solid and lasting through your own efforts. Rebecca leaned forward. She won't admit she was wrong. You know, Mom. But she's been asking if I think you'd be willing to see her. If maybe there's a way to heal some of the damage. I thought about Margaret, my mother who'd made me feel invisible for most of my life, who'd agreed with Rebecca that my daughters were an embarrassment, who'd chosen social appearances over her own grandchildren's feelings. I don't know, I said honestly. That's a bigger conversation with higher stakes. Maybe after we see how things go with you and the girls. That's fair. I just wanted you to know that the whole family dynamic is shifting. People are starting to recognize that being right about money and status doesn't make you right about what matters. Rebecca stood up, gathering her purse and coat. Thank you for hearing me out, Nora. Thank you for giving me a chance to try to do better. As she reached the door, I called after her. Rebecca, Portland might be exactly what your family needs. A fresh start, where you can define yourselves by who you're becoming instead of who you used to be. She smiled, and for the first time since we were children, it looked completely genuine. Maybe you're right. Maybe sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family is the chance to start over and get it right this time. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about second chances, about how crisis can strip away everything superficial and reveal what's actually important, about how sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our grace the most. I wasn't ready to trust completely, but I was ready to hope. And maybe, for now, that was enough. Christmas came again, exactly 1 year after the disaster that had changed everything. This time, I wasn't dreading the holidays or hoping for miraculous family reconciliation. This time, I was simply planning a celebration that reflected who we'd become. Emma and Lily helped me decorate our apartment with lights and ornaments we'd collected throughout the year. Nothing matched perfectly, but everything told a story. The ceramic angel Lily had painted at summer camp, the wooden snowflake Emma had crafted in art class, photos from our weekend trips to museums and parks, evidence of a life built on small joys instead of grand gestures. We had traditions now that belonged only to us. Christmas Eve pancakes for dinner. A movie marathon with more blankets than any 3 people could reasonably need. Reading aloud from books we'd discovered together. Simple pleasures that cost almost nothing but felt infinitely valuable. On Christmas morning, we were opening presents when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was our day, after all. But something made me check the caller ID. Rebecca. "Merry Christmas," she said when I picked up. In the background, I could hear children's voices and the general chaos of family holiday morning. "Merry Christmas to you, too. How's Portland treating you?" "Better than I expected. We found a little house to rent in a neighborhood where kids ride bikes in the streets and neighbors actually know each other's names. It's different from what we're used to, but good different." She paused, and I could hear her moving to a quieter room. "James loves his new job. He's helping people dig out from financial disasters. And he comes home every day feeling like he made a real difference. The kids have adjusted to their new school better than we thought they would. And me, how are you doing? I'm learning to be a person instead of a performance, if that makes sense. No more keeping up with social expectations or maintaining appearances. Just figuring out day by day how to be a good mother, a good wife, a good human being. That sounds healthy. It is. It's also the hardest thing I've ever done, but in a satisfying way. Like building muscle instead of just pretending to be strong. I could hear a baby crying in the background. Rebecca had given birth to a daughter in October, a little girl they'd named Grace. "The reason I'm calling," Rebecca continued, "is that I wanted to thank you for the example you set, for the honesty you showed me, for giving me a chance to try to do better. You did the work, Rebecca. I just stopped enabling you to avoid it. Maybe. But you also showed me what it looked like to build something real instead of something impressive, to value substance over appearance, to make decisions based on what's best for your children instead of what looks best to other people." Emma appeared at my elbow, tugging on my sleeve. "Mom, is that Aunt Rebecca? Can we talk to her?" I looked at my daughter's face, bright with curiosity and hope, and realized that holding grudges was a luxury we could no longer afford. My children deserved the chance to know their extended family, to benefit from relationships that had been healed rather than abandoned. "Would you like to say hello to the girls?" I asked Rebecca. "I'd love that." I put the phone on speaker, and my daughters crowded around to wish their Aunt Merry Christmas. Rebecca told them about their new baby cousin, about the snow in Portland, about how their older cousins were learning to ski. It was the kind of normal, warm family conversation I'd always hoped for, but never expected to have. After the girls wandered back to their presents, Rebecca and I talked for a few more minutes about practical things, plans to visit in the spring, ideas for staying in touch regularly instead of only during crises, the possibility of building something positive from the ruins of our old family dynamic. "There's one more thing," Rebecca said as we prepared to hang up. "Mom called yesterday." I felt my stomach tighten. "Oh?" "She wanted to know if I thought you'd be willing to talk to her. She's been doing some thinking this year, about choices she's made, things she said. She knows she has a lot to answer for." "I'm not ready for that conversation yet," I said honestly. I told her you might not be, but I also told her that when and if you are ready, she needs to come prepared to listen more than she talks, to acknowledge harm instead of explaining it away, to ask what you need from her instead of demanding what she wants from you. And what did she say to that? That she understands. That she'll wait as long as it takes because she finally realizes what she's been risking by treating you the way she has. After we hung up, I sat with my daughters on our couch, surrounded by wrapping paper and the debris of a modest but joyful Christmas morning. Through our windows, I could see neighbors walking dogs, children testing new bikes, families heading out for holiday visits. "Mom," Emma said, curling up next to me, "do you think we'll ever have normal family Christmases? Like with grandparents and aunts and uncles all together?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. Not whether we could forgive the people who'd hurt us, but whether we could build something better from the pieces that remained. I think, I said carefully, that we might be able to have something even better than normal. We might be able to have honest, real, based on who people actually are instead of who they're pretending to be. Lily looked up from the book she was flipping through. Would that include Grandma Margaret? Maybe someday, baby. If she's willing to learn how to love us the way we deserve to be loved. And if she's not, I hugged both my daughters closer. Then we keep building the family we choose. The people who see how wonderful you are and celebrate it instead of trying to change it. That afternoon, as we prepared our simple Christmas dinner, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. I'd lost the family I'd been trying to please my whole life, but I'd gained something far more valuable: the knowledge of my own worth, the confidence to set boundaries, and the peace that comes from refusing to accept love that comes with conditions. My daughters were growing up knowing they were valued unconditionally. They were learning to expect respect, to recognize manipulation, to trust their own judgment about how they deserve to be treated. Those lessons would serve them far better than any inheritance or family connection ever could. Christmas used to be about hoping for acceptance from people who were determined to withhold it. Now it was about celebrating the love we'd built, the strength we'd discovered, and the future we were creating together. And you know what? This version was infinitely better. 1 year later, I received an invitation that would have been unthinkable just 24 months earlier. Rebecca was hosting Christmas in Portland, and she wanted us to come. Not as charity cases or obligation guests, but as family she genuinely wanted to spend the holiday with. The invitation came with a long letter explaining her thinking. She and James had spent 2 years rebuilding their lives from the ground up, and this Christmas would be their first attempt at hosting extended family in their new home. She wanted it to be different from the performative gatherings of the past, smaller, more intimate, focused on connection rather than impression. I know I have no right to ask this, she wrote, but I hope you'll consider giving our family another chance. Not to go back to the way things were, but to create something better together. Emma and Lily were cautiously excited about the possibility. They'd been video chatting with their cousins regularly and were curious about Rebecca's new baby, their cousin Grace. They'd also been corresponding with Margaret, who had written them careful, thoughtful letters apologizing for her past behavior and asking for the chance to be a better grandmother. Rebecca had given her our address after asking my permission first. I'll admit, I was skeptical. People don't change fundamental character traits just because their circumstances shift. But the consistency of Rebecca's efforts over 2 years, the genuine remorse in Margaret's letters, and my daughter's desire to experience positive family relationships eventually won me over. If we go, I told the girls, we go as ourselves. No performing, no trying to be different to make other people comfortable. If they want us there, they get the real us. Deal, Emma said, grinning. I like us the way we are. The trip to Portland revealed a family transformed by necessity and choice. Rebecca's house was small but warm, decorated for Christmas with handmade ornaments and mismatched furniture that somehow created a more welcoming atmosphere than her previous showplace ever had. James greeted us with genuine warmth, thanking me for the financial advice I'd given Rebecca during their crisis. He looked relaxed in a way I'd never seen before, more present with his children, more connected to his wife. Crisis had stripped away his arrogance and revealed someone worth knowing. Margaret arrived the second day, nervous in a way that was both heartbreaking and encouraging. She'd aged in the past 2 years, but she seemed softer somehow, less rigid in her opinions, more willing to listen than lecture. Her first act was to kneel down to Lily and Emma's level and look them directly in the eye. I owe you both an apology, she said clearly. I was wrong about you, wrong about your mother, wrong about what makes a family valuable. You are both extraordinary children, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. The girls accepted her apology with the grace that children often show when adults finally start behaving like adults. They spent the next few days getting to know this new version of their grandmother, one who asked about their interests instead of correcting their behavior, who celebrated their accomplishments instead of comparing them to other children. The Christmas Eve photo session was Rebecca's idea, but it looked nothing like her previous productions. Instead of a formal portrait, she suggested we take pictures throughout the day, cooking together, playing games, opening presents. Candid moments that captured joy rather than perfection. When she pulled out her camera that evening, as we sat around the Christmas tree with mugs of hot chocolate and plates of cookies, she made an announcement. Last time we were all together for Christmas, I said some terrible things. I made choices that hurt people I love, and I lost 2 years of my niece's lives because of my pride and selfishness. She looked directly at my daughters. Lily, Emma, I want you to know that you are the most important people in every photo we take. Not because you're perfect, but because you're yourselves. Because you're kind and funny and smart and exactly the right people to be in our family. The photo she took that night shows all of us laughing at something Lily had said. Grace sleeping peacefully in Margaret's arms, Emma leaning against James as he helped her with a puzzle. We're all slightly messy from a day of cooking and playing, wearing comfortable clothes and genuine expressions. It's been on my refrigerator for 6 months now, and every time I look at it, I remember what family is supposed to feel like. Not performance, not competition, not conditional approval. Just people who choose to love each other despite their flaws, who create space for everyone to be authentic, who measure success by kindness rather than achievements. On Christmas morning, as I watched my daughters open presents surrounded by family members who genuinely celebrated their happiness, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of that first Christmas rejection had forced me to build a life based on my own values, rather than other people's expectations. It had taught my daughters that their worth wasn't negotiable. It had ultimately led to relationships built on truth rather than obligation. Rebecca found me in the kitchen later that morning as I was helping with breakfast preparation. "Thank you," she said simply, "for giving us another chance, for showing us what we could become if we were willing to do the work." "Thank you for doing the work," I replied, "for becoming people worthy of my daughter's love." As I flew home with Lily and Emma after that Christmas, listening to them chatter about their cousins and plans for future visits, I realized that sometimes the most painful family moments lead to the most powerful transformations. Sometimes people have to lose everything they thought mattered before they can discover what actually does. My sister had told my children they weren't important enough for the Christmas photos. In response, I'd built a life where they knew they were important enough for everything, where their happiness mattered more than appearances, where they would never again doubt their own worth because someone else had forgotten theirs. And that, it turned out, was the greatest Christmas gift I could have ever given them. Not the perfect family I'd always wanted, but something better. The knowledge that they deserved perfect love, and the strength to accept nothing less. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just refusing to let other people's limitations become your own. Sometimes it's building something so beautiful from the ashes that everyone who tried to break you ends up asking for the blueprint. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your own strength. And remember, you're important enough for every photo, every celebration, every moment of joy life has to offer.